afternoon. Welcome to the family happy hour, as it were. My name is Margaret diZerega. I'm the director of the Family Justice Program at the Vera Institute of Justice, and I have the pleasure today of moderating this session, so you'll be hearing from my colleagues who I'll introduce in a second. And what I wanted to just do was give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover, and then we'll hear from each of the presenters in turn, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end of the session for Q&A. You've all come to the right place because we're being videotaped. So we're going to use this mic to capture your comments on the recording, and so we'll just ask during the Q&A. If you could wait, I'll bring over the mic so we can capture the question and then the response. So we're here for a couple main questions. We're going to talk a little bit about some effective strategies for enhancing the quality and the quantity of family and client engagement. You'll hear some examples of how programs are helping individuals improve their pro-social support. And then we'll talk also about how a focus on family and other social support enhances program outcomes. So what's the connection between the larger goals around recidivism reduction, family well-being, and those sorts of things. So, sort of shifting gears from the plenary, we saw the sort of federal agency family, but I want you just to think for a second about, when you knew you were going to come to this conference, who were all of the different people that you had to notify? What were all the different things that in your daily life you had to think about? Who's going to, pick up little Junior from school, or take care of the, things at home, or other things at the office. And just for a second, just sort of think about that network of people who are all impacted by your absence, by the fact that you're here at this conference today. And, I'm not a mind reader, but my guess is that for you, like for many of us, that range of people includes not only your family members in your home, maybe extended family members who are wondering, why you're not going to make the weekly call, but also people who you consider to be like family, friends, neighbors. If you're in a recreational basketball league, your teammates are wondering why you're missing your game, etc. And just like for us, our family involves, a really wide-ranging definition. Throughout the discussion today, I think you're going to be hearing the ways that different programs and grantees are also applying this broad definition of family to include not only those traditional and elected family members, but also extended family members. And, I think this is probably not news to many of you, but just a couple of things to keep in mind that we know the impact of incarceration and reentry on families, can look like a lot of different things. So people who are in our jails and prisons and juvenile justice systems provide a lot to their families, not only income, but they might be the other parent. They can provide emotional support. Maybe they're making sure that an elderly relative is taking their medication. And then during that reentry process, families experience a whole other set of challenges. They might find that, relationships are challenged. There's different roles in the household. There's now a new potential strain on financial resources, and they may be dealing with aspects of the law enforcement system that, they haven't previously interacted with, like parole and probation, just to name a few. There's some chairs in the front if you want to come on up. So I think one of the differences that for me really crystallizes how a family-focused approach differs from maybe what business as usual kind of looks like is thinking about the difference between an individual approach, where we really are focusing on the individual client, whether that's someone in a jail or prison, or an adult or a child in the program that you serve, to really thinking about that person in the context of their family, and in all of your sort of policies and programs and approaches, just thinking about how that person is connected to the family and how that might impact who's at the table for discussions, or even things like how many chairs, are in your parole officers' offices. So the other aspect that this presentation focuses on is not only the family-focused piece, but also the strength-based piece. So I wanted to just sort of quickly share with you what I think about when I define a strength-based approach. And it's really based on these principles, starting with the belief that all people are motivated, might not be the thing that we think from the research is most going to contribute to success. But, how can we understand what their motivation is, tap into that, and use that to help motivate behavior change? And it's also operating with the belief that people have had past success, they have capabilities, and again, bringing those to the forefront to help people move forward with the changes that they're working on. And I think, in this, for those of you who are in the morning session, we talked a lot about culture change and how in many institutions, both correctional settings and others, this shift towards a family focus and a strength-based approach is a significant difference. And so we also want to think about how we reinforce the strengths of our workforce, our government partners, or the other people who are working on these projects. So instead of focusing on this sort of traditional focus side, how in those conversations or program meetings can we focus on the things that we can do, given our current resources, or where we've had success in the past around families, and how can we apply that moving forward? Or even letting people dream about what are the possibilities. If our goal for our agency was that it was, we made sure that everyone left our facility connected to people who were important to them, those people had been involved all along the way, what would look different? What could we do? So I would encourage you, as you listen to the presenters today, and then as we engage in discussion towards the end of the session, to think both about how this family-focused approach is happening in your respective agencies, and also the strength-based piece and where you see opportunities to increase that. So with that, I want to sort of let you know a little bit about who's here in front of you today. You'll hear first from Erik, who's from the National Fatherhood Initiative, and I learned he's based in Pittsburgh. And then we'll hear from Jenssen, who's the manager of transition services with the Department of Community Justice in Multnomah County, Oregon, in the Portland area. And then we'll hear from Kelli, who comes from San Francisco and is the program manager of One Family at Community Works. So 3 very different perspectives coming from the sort of national lens and the community correction side, and then from the programmatic side. And then I'll kind of do a little wrap up at the end around some resources and tools that might be of use to you. And then we really want to hear from you all what's working, what questions do you have for each other as well as for the panelists. So I'm going to turn it over to Erik and let you get your PowerPoint ready up here.
Thank you. So good afternoon. It's nice to be here today with you all. Hopefully the energy level isn't waning too much, but I'm Erik Vecere with the National Fatherhood Initiative, and I know we're not going to solve all the world's problems with a 15-minute presentation here, but I hope to at least maybe highlight a couple of things related to the fatherhood component to a successful reentry process. And also just to provide some examples of some things that we've learned with some of our partners and through our curricula across the country. So I'm just going to jump right into it. First kind of defining the issue. Many of you may be aware of this already, but one of the things that we did at NFI over the last few years is conducted several large-scale surveys around fathers' attitudes towards fathering, as well as mothers' attitudes towards fathering. And one of the things that came up was that 9 in 10 moms and dads believe there is a father absence crisis in America today. And you can see by the actual statistics up there that they have reason to think that. There's 24 million children living in homes absent their biological father, and that's triple the rate of what it was in 1960. So it's definitely been a wake-up call for us that, within our society, there has been a shift in this father absence issue. And so, why do fathers matter? Well, there's consequences of father absence. Children in father-absent homes are 2 to 5 times more likely to live in poverty, fail in school, develop emotional and behavioral problems, abuse drugs, be abused and neglected, commit suicide. And then, of course, I've highlighted becoming involved in crime, and you can see how a lot of these issues would relate to that and certainly create a higher probability that a child at some point in their life might be involved in some kind of criminal activity. We'd be remiss, though, to just talk about the consequences of father absence without talking about the flip to that, the benefits of father involvement, which are better cognitive outcomes even as infants, higher self-esteem, higher grades, lower levels of drug and alcohol use, and then this final one, higher levels of empathy and other pro-social behavior. Again, we can see how that can tie into the kinds of behaviors that could lead to, criminal activity or getting involved with the criminal justice system. So why should we involve fathers in reentry efforts? Well, first of all, 92% of incarcerated parents happen to be dads. So, that's probably the most obvious, that it's a huge percentage. Also, most inmates grew up in father-absent homes or with poor fathering role models. I'm sure you've all kind of seen the intergenerational cycle that can happen as a result of that, and that we really need to try to break the cycle of incarceration by helping fathers establish a new legacy for their family. And I should mention, too, that when we talk about fatherhood programming, that I want to make sure that I emphasize that there is a difference between fatherhood programming and parenting programming. And to come back to that longitudinal or the survey that we did with the moms and the dads about their attitudes, one of the things that came up that really fascinated me is a dynamic that I like to call the replaceability factor. And in both of these surveys that we took with thousands of moms and dads across the country, controlling for socioeconomic and all kinds of other, different categories of demographics, is that when we talk to the fathers, 53% of fathers felt that they could be replaced by mom. But the real kicker was that 56%, nearly 57% of fathers believed that they could be easily replaced by another man. And so it's really this perception from many fathers out there that as a dad, I'm nice, but maybe I'm not necessary. And so by establishing a father-specific kind of program, what we can do is aside from the parenting skills, we can then begin to focus on the fathering skills. What are those unique things that the dad brings to the parenting process to help with this replaceability factor? And what was interesting is when we did the same survey with the moms, we found that the percentages were actually higher. It was 55% of the moms believed that he could be replaced by her, and 66% believed that he could be replaced by another man. So this replaceability factor is kind of a key thing. And the second thing that makes it important to specifically focus on fathers with a fathering program is that it can address critical issues that men face. Okay, things like masculinity, handling, expressing emotions, grief, loss and grief are two big issues as well. Men's health issues. These are all things, critical issues that can be handled with a father-specific program that sometimes kind of gets lost in the parenting programs. A couple other reasons for targeting fathers. Family and community connections are the keys to reducing recidivism. And I probably, in the last few weeks, I've come across 6 different studies that have supported this fact that, the more that they can get connected with their families, the less probability that they're going to be coming back to prison. And, so with that, we want to make sure that we're connecting them to something that's bigger than themselves. And fatherhood, their children, provide a powerful, motivating force for that. And if you think about it, all of the things that we want to do, like in the second bullet, with an effective reentry program, with education, if we help them get educated and get them employed and all of this. But if you think about it, if we educate them and they don't have that additional motivation to sustain their change or to use it in a healthy way, what do we have? Basically, we have smarter criminals, right? Because we're really not helping them transform beyond that. Same thing with jobs. We can get them a job, but what will motivate them to stay in that job? Is it something beyond themselves, living beyond themselves, so that well, the reason why I'm going to work and why I might have to put up with some of this stuff that otherwise I might just quit or, cause some other issues, I might stick with it a little bit more now because I have a reason, understanding one of my roles as being a good dad is providing. So I say one because there's provide, nurture, and guide. We always want to expand that role, but that's certainly a big motivating factor. So what about the children? Well, there are a lot of children affected by it. I don't need to tell you about that too much, but the last bullet, the number of children with a father in prison has grown by 77% since 1991 was a bit of an eye-opener for me. That even in the recent history, that has really been a major factor. And of course, they are adversely impacted by incarcerated parents. Post-traumatic stress disorder, the intergenerational cycle of crime we talked about, and then a litany of other consequences that can come about. The DC-based Center for Law and Social Policy recently noted the desire of parents to reunite with their children is often the key motivation for helping them turn their lives around. And here is a quote from a father on his release and related to his relationship with his 5-year-old daughter. And I think that, it kind of speaks for itself. This is a father who went through one of our incarcerated fatherhood programs called Inside Out Dad. And he said, "She's brought a lot of meaning and purpose to my life. She keeps me on the right track. You have so much stress when you come out, stress of finding a job, following the rules of parole. You feel everything is against you. When I came out, instead of my daughter running from me saying, 'Who is this guy?' she gave me a kiss." Who is this guy? So this whole concept that he repeats about she keeps me right on track. She helps keep me on track. It's that motivating factor, that motivational engine as I put up at the top of the slide. And finally, I just want to wrap up with just a few quick slides about this connection project that we did at NFI, which was an 18-month initiative funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And the goal was to expand and highlight services aimed at helping fathers successfully re-enter society by strengthening the relationships they have with their children and the mother of their children. And again, this is another quote from a gentleman who went through the Inside Out Dad program. "Once you lose outside contact, you lose hope. Hope is the only thing that keeps you going in here. Inside Out Dad woke me up. This program has helped me get back in touch with my kids." So that powerful, motivating engine again, connecting them with their role as a father. Equally compelling is from the probation and parole officer that we received a comment from who said, "I just wanted to let you know that since we started sending people to this program, my caseload is at 0% reincarcerated. I realize that it's not the magic pill, but that number is amazing." And he was just completely blown away by that. So in wrapping up, I just wanted to bring your attention to this connectionsproject.org, which was the end result of this project that we ended last year. And there are a number of free resources on there that you can use for the fathers directly or things for your program or your agency that can help you think in terms of being more father-friendly or things that you can do to help connect them to their role as a father. There's also webinars on there that you can view. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that there are a number of programs that are just starting, kind of cutting-edge stuff, connecting the pre-release with the post-release programming. With our particular curriculum, it would be Inside Out Dad pre-release and then 24/7 Dad post-release. And what they're doing is they're training their probation and parole officers. Many of these places are actually delivering them themselves. They're cutting back their case management load and allowing them to run some programs. They're called program liaisons. And what they're doing is as they're coming back into community, they're connecting the fathers who have already done the Inside Out Dad 12 sessions pre-release and connecting them post-release now in the community as they're re-entering. So, again, if we're thinking about this family reentry process, family-centric reentry process is what we like to call it, those are some things that many are now starting to think about, like, how can we connect them pre and post release with programming that can help them sustain the change that they have begun before they've left. So that's all I have. I'm going to, I guess, turn it over to next.
Where are they doing that? Where are the POs doing that program piece? Where is that happening?
One is in Kentucky. One is in Indiana, the Indiana DOC, and the other one is South Dakota.
Wow.
Yeah, those are the three most recent ones that we actually trained them on both. You know, the Inside Out Dad, and then we go back and train the, would train the facility, the DOC, on the Inside Out Dad, and then the
24/7 is the PO?
Right.
And so how long have you been doing that? I'm sorry. I'm going to learn too. So how long have you been doing the 24/7 Dad? Oh,
That's right.
that's right. No, seriously, how long have they been doing the 24/7 Dad? Aren't you all interested? Don't you want to know how long?
The 24/7 Dad side of it is the newest part of this reentry process. So most of them are just getting started with that. Now, the Indiana DOC had been doing the Inside Out Dad for quite a while, had started the 24/7 Dad, and what they've seen is a 30% reduction in recidivism. So we do know from that there is promise for it, and we will probably know over the next year or two with the other two locations who have just started the 24/7 Dad how that's going to translate into, you know, what's happening in their communities. So.
And do you know the contacts for Indiana? No, because it would be really great to send some officers to see that.
Yeah, I can get that for you, but I don't have it with me.
As we transition between Erik and Leaf,
I'm sorry.
for those of you who are in the hall, we've got some chairs up here. If you're seated next to an empty chair, can you just raise your hand? Thank you. Come on in.
No, I don't have a PowerPoint.
And there's two up here too.
Yeah, look there. Wasn't that great? Didn't they do a great job? Did a great job. That was excellent. So I'm here just to talk a little bit how we're doing outreach to families and how we're engaging families and what we've been doing at Transition Services in Multnomah County. There's one little caveat I do want to add first, is that we are transition, we are probation and parole, and we are largely connected to the person who is releasing from prison, and we're trying to engage them so they can be successful on supervision. Of course, what we learn over time that it's really important to engage the family. So one of the things that we've been working on as far as making sure that we're asking at least 6 months out, are there family members that they're connected to, who those family members are, and how can we connect to those family members prior to release to give them a much better understanding of what to expect when they get released and how we're working together with the family as well as the person who's releasing so that we can assist them with engagement. What I want to add to that is I consider family to be huge. Not just families looking at people who are raising children of the incarcerated, but as you know, we have a lot of people who we're incarcerating who have cognitive and mental health challenges. We work with a lot of adults in prison who have special needs, and they are returning home to parents who need support and have a lot of questions. So one of the things that we really try to do also is to work with those families who have adult children in the system who have special needs, doing engagement with those family members as well, making sure they understand what the pro-social supports are, what are things that they should be connecting to so they can have long-term support, whether it's community-based, faith-based, or whatever will work individually for that person. We're here, of course, because it's the second chance, and we've been working with our treatment program specifically to identify people who are involved in residential treatment inside the prison, who have a caregiver who are rearing their children on the outside, and how can we connect those families to supports. We've been very lucky and as far as reaching to those families, providing supports, and helping them come together through various programs. What's been successful about it is one of the things I heard this morning was, how do you engage families, the trust issues, people would be a little leery. We have not found that to be true. Actually, what we've heard from most families, whether if they have small children that they're, children of the incarcerated as far as like raising children or who are parents of adult children inside, actually what we've heard from family members is this: what took you so long to call us? what took you so long to realize that we were part of the picture? What took you so long? We've actually had a different experience. We've had family members who really want to talk to us, who really want to participate, and who really want to have a better understanding, as well as telling us what has been difficult for them, what's been difficult about visitation, what's been difficult about reaching to their loved one inside. How can we work together to have a better plan? And yes, they want to be part of that plan when someone comes out, their loved one comes out of prison or jail. So what's been really interesting for us is that what's been really great is that there are all these strengths and all these people out there who really want to help this person when they get out, and we have not been knocking on the right doors. We've been developing services and programs thinking that they're going to be independent, when in reality we should have been, I believe, this is my opinion, is that we should have been incorporating that probably for a long time ago, as it were. So we've been very successful in trying to connect the services and programs with families, whether it's children of the incarcerated or with adults who are releasing, who have parents who are going to care for them because they have special needs, or be connected to them. What's been important for us is to remember that every family is not the same. People are independent, and they need an individual case plan and an individual transition plan to assist for them to be successful. They have different strengths. They have different issues or concerns that they may need to address. So for us, the most successful part of engagement has been realizing that not one size fits all, and that you need to make sure that you're addressing specific concerns and issues that is based on those families' concerns, needs, strengths, things that they determine that would be important for them to assist with their successful reintegration. That has really been the most powerful tool for us. The other thing that's been really helpful for us is making it possible for people who may not be the, maybe they've not been able to visit, or they see themselves not maybe the primary support for this person, or they want more information. One of the things that we've been doing that has been really helpful for us is that we do an orientation every month, making it possible for people to gain general information and ask questions or figure out how they can be involved if they've not been called or contacted. I'll pass this around if you're interested in receiving this information as well as other information that we use for family engagement, assessment tools, transition plans, postcards that we send, different information on how we reach in. You're welcome to do that. You can put your name on this list, and I'll email all that information to you. The other thing is that we realize that we have to start at different places, whether it's reaching into the prison, starting when they first enter in jail, reaching out to people in various different places, as opposed to only doing it in one location. That also has helped us immensely. But the most important thing that I think has really helped us as a team, as transition, is if staff members were here for my team right now, they would say this undeniably. If a family member calls, it is a priority phone call. We must talk to that family member and engage with them immediately. If they have questions or concerns and they want to meet with us, we say, yes, what time? If they need to talk to us right now, we say, yes, we're available. Because that family member is called for a reason, and they want to participate in their loved one's life who's experiencing a very stressful experience in their life. The only way they're going to engage with us and trust us if we say, yes, we're here, yes, we want to hear you, yes, we want to work with you to make it a successful transition for everyone, because that person does impact the family. That family is not only a support, but they're also impacted by this loved one who's going through this process. So we want to support both sides. We want to make sure everyone is successful in that process. So that's what's really worked for us. We make sure, whether we do it through reach-in, whether we do it through intake, whether we do it through treatment when they're in the prison, just reaching out and making sure you're reaching out to any location that you can. Every opportunity, make sure people know that you're available and you want to assist and you want to participate to engage that family and make it possible for them to know the other supports and resources that are available in the community that can help them. And that's the greatest thing that I can tell you, as well as every family is different. Be open to that. Seriously, be open to everybody has different needs and concerns, and if we're open to that and we can work with each other, we can help these families be successful. And I say this, and I know I'm even being taped, but our goal should be to close prisons, and the only way we're going to do that is we work together as communities and helping these families. So I think that should be a goal for all of us, is to close prisons, and the only way we're going to do it is if we do it together. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, we're going to do a quick So please welcome up Kelli from San Francisco.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelli. I work for the One Family program with Community Works at the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of our programs that is through the Second Chance Act today, and a little bit about our philosophy and what it is that we do. So the program I'm going to talk about is called NOVA OFRI. I run One Family, and it's a collaboration between Community Works, which is a nonprofit community-based organization, the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, and their program called NOVA, the No Violence Alliance, the San Francisco Adult Probation Department, and the Bridging Group, who's our evaluator. The No Violence Alliance was established in 2006. It's a collaboration between the Sheriff's Department and many other community agencies. Their goal is to address violence by reducing recidivism and aiding individuals who have violent offenses in the reentry process. And they provide a continuum of services through intensive case management, violence prevention services, and transitional housing. The One Family program is the piece that I work on, and about 4 years ago, a little bit longer than that, there was a group of people in the community who decided that they really wanted to advocate for children who had parents who were incarcerated. And they were really focusing on foster care kids. And so they came to the Sheriff's Department and asked if they would be able to extend contact visiting for children who had a parent who was incarcerated in the foster care system. The Sheriff's Department said that if they were going to extend any programming to a group of kids, it was going to be to all kids, not to just one group of kids. The San Francisco Children of Incarcerated Parents Partnership, which is what SFCIP stands for, and that's a group of community organizations that all came together on the behalf of the children of incarcerated parents. So between those two groups of people, the Sheriff's Department and SFCIP, they created a plan for the One Family program. I was hired on about 3.5 years ago to execute this very lofty goal of increasing parent-child contact visits within the jail in San Francisco. The perspective that we work from is from the eyes of the child. In a minute, I'll get to the Children's Bill of Rights that the SFCIP group did. And that means that when we're doing programming in the jails at San Francisco, when it comes to kids, it's about what's happening for the kids, their perspective, what they feel, what they want, and bringing their voice into a system that's predominantly adult-focused. And in that case, for me, that means that everyone matters. So a parent is a really important part of a child's life, and so they're just as important as the children when we're looking at the family. And that perspective carries us through all of the One Family programming. So the Children's Bill of Rights is a series of 8 rights that SFCIP created, and sfcip.org is the website if you want more information on it. And especially when those of you who are trying to advocate for the rights of children, this is a really good piece of information to start with, because it clearly outlines what the children need and what they want, and it shifts the perspective from the adult perspective to the child's perspective. So the 8 rights are the right to be kept safe and informed at the time of my parents' arrest, the right to be heard when decisions are made about me, the right to be considered when decisions are made about my parent, the right to be well cared for in my parent's absence, the right to speak with, see, and touch my parent, the right to support as I face my parent's incarceration, the right not to be judged, blamed, or labeled because my parent is incarcerated, and the right to a lifelong relationship with my parent. The 2 rights that we work on at One Family is the right to speak with, see, and touch my parent, and the right to a lifelong relationship with my parent. So our perspective at One Family is the family is a system. My background is in family therapy with a social justice emphasis. So I sort of brought that to the system when I came on board a few years ago. And this is a quote by Vecere that I think sums up nicely how we should look at families, especially in the criminal justice system, in order to include all pieces of the puzzle. In a mobile, all the pieces, no matter what size or shape, can be grouped together and balanced by shortening or lengthening their strings, rearranging the distance between pieces, or changing their weight. So it is with a family. None of the family members is identical to any other. Each is different and at a different level of growth. As in a mobile, you can't arrange one member without thinking of the others. So it's our belief that one of the best ways to advocate for children of incarcerated parents is to advocate for their parents. Any child wants to be with their parent. They want them healthy, they want them happy, and they want them around. And it doesn't matter what the situation is that you're in. We're specifically dealing with incarceration, but that's true for every child. It's true for all of you sitting here in the room. It's true for all of your children, and it's true for the people who are incarcerated too. And the children should never be the victims of the incarceration, and unfortunately they are all too often. And we're dealing dealing with numbers of 3 million children in the country that have a parent incarcerated. It's a major issue, and our perspective needs to be shifted so that we take care of them. And again, one of the best ways to do that is to support their parents. So from that perspective, one of our guiding principles at One Family is that the client is their own greatest resource. So one of the things that we don't like to do is pretend that we know better than them, that we're smarter than them, that we have all the answers. They come to the table with a lot of experience, a great deal of resiliency, a great deal of strength, and they love their children. There's certainly things that have happened that are not okay, and certainly things that shouldn't have happened, both that were their fault and some that weren't. But we work on the perspective that we want a label that they're proud of and that they want to grow. And so when you're dealing with motivation, when you're dealing with reentry, if you're connecting to that label of self, then that will help carry you through all of those difficult times, because one way or another, their life is not going to be easy. Once you've been in the system, it is difficult to get out of it in one way or another, to see yourself differently, to get employment, all the things that the Attorney General was mentioning earlier. So by working on a value system that they themselves create and that they can believe in while they're incarcerated can really help influence those things in a positive way. We hold graduations every 5 weeks through our classes in charter school, which is a fully operational high school that the San Francisco Sheriff's Department has within its walls. And one of the things we ask them to do at the end of graduation is to answer the question, I am an honorable man because. So that starts the process for them to really internalize and think about how they're valuable, what that means to them, and how they can stay that way as a parent and remember that that's the core of who they want to be. We also look at different layers. So these issues are not just an individual issue. So all of the influences that have happened in terms of culture and social standing and communities and neighborhoods, those all have an impact on how it shows up on any individual who's incarcerated. So not only do we look at how they can what they can control and the responsibilities that they have, we also look at the outside influences. So the 4 different components of One Family are parent-child contact visits. That does mean contact. So that is not plexiglass visits. That is not a child banging on a window to see their parent. That means that they can be in the same room. That means that they get to hug. That means that they get to touch. There's really no limitations once they get into that room in terms of them being able to play, to talk, to cry, to have the difficult conversations that need to have happen, or to just let a 2-year-old play, because ultimately that's pretty much what they want to do wherever they are as well. We have parenting inside-out classes, family transition circles, which I'll talk more about, and individual and family therapy. And those are the core things that we worked on. It started with the parent-child contact visits and the parenting inside-out classes, and we added the 2 later components to fill some gaps that we were finding. So as I mentioned, the contact visits, we were able to expand those from 1 to 3 days a week. I operate all of those inside the Sheriff's Department. I can bring up to 45 children into the jail a week. The goal is to reduce the trauma associated with parental separation and for them to remain connected during a difficult time, and to support the parent in utilizing skills acquired through classes and therapy. The Parenting Inside Out classes is an evidence-based cognitive behavioral curriculum designed specifically for justice-involved parents. It's from an adult learner perspective. It's very interactive. In the classroom, it's about this size. There's posters all over the walls of things that they've done together, the team building that they do, and we really focus on community and accountability. So again, it's not any one person standing up there and telling them about their life. It's them telling each other about their life and focusing on their community, and in some cases redefining what community means, because you can get situations where community is very strong, but unfortunately it can be used for negative things, but that's their community, that's their family. They can take those same things and create those inside the jail in the most unlikely of places and have a positive community where they can be there for each other, where they can learn from each other's experiences, where they can talk about the things that are very difficult that traditionally you're not able to do. For the women, there's a ton of shame and guilt you have to go through. For the men, there's a ton of really just being honest about where you're at and dropping kind of that willingness to be vulnerable. So this is a poem from one of our parents. This didn't require any therapy. This didn't require any other work than to just take our class inside, and this is what he wrote. Welcome to the place where I learned to breathe, to support my children, listen and not leave. To understand tantrums and the ways that they play, I learned how to communicate in a child type of way. I learned to give praise for what they achieve and support them fully in what they believe? How do I know what yelling does to the brain and that it expands when you praise, and when your child is in the car with the music blasting loud, cannot learn a thing unless mingled in the crowd? The uneducated has nowhere to turn. The way to change stats is you help inmates learn. Hope will change attitudes and percentages, no doubt. I changed the way I father and parenting inside out. This is also not an anomaly. It was incredibly difficult to try to weed through the document upon document upon document of poems that they write every graduation. So every 5 weeks, 50 men, 20 women, depending on what graduations we have, produce things like this. So what Margaret was saying in the beginning, that all of these things are already inside them, we just set the stage to bring them out. Family Transition Circles is our restorative justice component of our program. It's a place where families can come in and have a conversation about the impact of the incarceration. It empowers clients to take responsibilities for the ways in which their behavior and choices have harmed and affected others. And it allows them to make amends for those decisions and create a plan to make things as right as possible. It's also a really important opportunity for families to voice their experiences, hurt, and hope in a safe environment. It's crucial that we understand at the point of incarceration, there's a long history of things that have happened before then. And if those things aren't talked about, if those things aren't addressed and given a voice, they will continue to show up in people's lives in one way or another. And independent of every individual's views, ultimately we all want safer communities, and this is one way that we can release some of that pain in order to move forward in a positive way. It's also a lot of work for the parent in custody. A lot. They have to immediately start looking at the things that they would typically avoid, immediately start looking at how they've harmed their children. And what we think in terms of punishment is that there's no greater punishment than looking at the pain that has been in your life and that you've harmed your child because of that pain. And once they are able to move through that, they really take making that a healing process very seriously. So some of the things we heard from clients who have participated in a family transition circle are that I will now give my daughter more opportunity to just cry when she needs to. I will move along with my son at his pace instead of pushing him. I will co-parent with my mother-in-law more openly and effectively. And the last quote is from a mother who participated in a family transition circle. Her son was incarcerated and her other son is dead. And so she said to her son during a circle, the best way you can honor your brother is to begin to heal yourself. So lastly, we also provide individual and family therapy. Our focus is mainly to start with the client who's in custody. So it's really important to look at families, but they need to be the entry point. They need to take responsibility for where they are in their own healing first before we can start to weed out into the family. So we see incarceration as an entry point to begin therapy, but it's not an isolated event. It also is an opportunity to provide in-depth parenting support. It explores familial and behavioral patterns, and it allows them to gain new positive coping skills that can be practiced in real time immediately. I always say the jail is the best place to practice any new skill you want to learn because you're going to run into obstacles every minute of every day. So they really have an opportunity to see how that's going for them and then come back and meet with people individually to talk about what needs to happen. So the components of the NOVA OFRI program is that we have a pre-release services and post-release services. So we do a lot of the work inside the jail. A NOVA case manager comes to meet with a client and also works on those components I talked about earlier of transitional housing and treatment and things of that nature. And then once they're released, we follow them through reentry. So also are able to provide some of those same services on the outside. We also have parenting classes on the outside as well for both men and women in the community. So the first NOVA OFRI cohort is 31 people, 77% of them male, 23% of them female. Here are some of the outcomes that we're working on. If the client has taken parenting class in the jail, if they've had contact visits while in jail, if a family eco map was completed, which is basically a way to identify all of the positive people in their life, if family-focused therapy and support has been part of their process, and restorative sessions and FTCs, and parenting class in the community. So the different types of things that they work on in parenting classes, everything from controlling their emotions, using problem-solving skills to resolve family issues, providing structure for children through routines and schedules, setting and enforcing rules and consequences with children that are appropriate, involved with children's school experiences, and encouraging child's strengths and accomplishments. So the strength-based perspective doesn't only just stop with the parent. It goes all the way through into how they're parenting their children. So this is ending with a quote from Satire as well. I wonder what would happen if suddenly during the night, all 5 billion persons in the world learned the essentials of congruent living. To love, value, and respect themselves fully, to be personally and socially responsible, and to use problems as challenges and opportunities for creative solutions. I think we would wake up in a different world, and a world in which is possible. So at One Family, we actually try to make these things happen. So not the idealistic nature of just waking up in the world. That would be nice and a lot easier for everybody involved. But we actually try to make those things happen in real life, in our modeling, in our corrective emotional experiences that go on between the facilitators and the clients, and with the family in general. And these aren't all of the essentials of congruent living as well. There's more of them. But keeping all of those in mind as we do our work, along with very high expectations from day one. And lastly, when I was thinking about quotes for the contact visits, for instance, they aren't even able to speak. They would just say thank you, the people who are able to participate in the services. They just cry and say thank you. They want to be with their children want to be with them, and I know that they would want all of you who do all of this work that sometimes can feel thankless and can feel like there's a never-ending string of problems you need to solve and fires you need to put out, that they really appreciate all the work that you're doing on their behalf. They all know I'm here. Part of our philosophy is that I want to bring the boardroom to them and them into the boardroom, so I know that they want you to know that they appreciate all the work that you do too. So thank you.
One thing that I'm always struck by at these conferences, and the family session in particular, is how much passion people bring who work on the family piece, and Kelli really exemplifies that. So I just wanted to share a couple of things around some of the tools that we work with at the Vera Institute's Family Justice Program, some of which have been mentioned already. And just real quickly, the Vera Institute, for those of you who don't know, we're a big nonprofit based in New York. We also have a DC office and have a lot of staff who work remotely. And the Family Justice Program focuses on training and technical assistance for corrections agencies, juvenile justice agencies, on how they can bring a more family-focused approach to the policies and practices that govern those agencies. So we get to do a lot of training with staff, help jurisdictions review some of their policies and look at some of the potentially unintended consequences of some of the policies that are impacting families and children. So Erik mentioned earlier some of the research around why it's so important to involve families, and I just wanted to raise share with you a couple of citations that maybe are useful in supporting the work that you all are doing. So we know that family contact while people are incarcerated certainly has been proven to have beneficial impacts on their behavior while incarcerated, as well as their behavior post-release, reduced recidivism, and increased compliance with parole, substance abuse treatment, all of those things. So regardless of where you are kind of along the reentry continuum, there's a study that supports the benefits of family involvement. And Erik did a great job with the Children of Incarcerated Parents piece, so I won't go over that. But I did want to share with you a couple of tools, because one of the things we hear a lot from jurisdictions is, how do we know who the supportive family members are? What are some ways that we can start having those conversations with the people that we're working with? So show of hands, who's familiar here with a genogram? Oh, excellent. Would anyone like to take a stab at a definition? Okay. Well, what you're all thinking, probably, is that a genogram is a lot like a family tree. So what we see on the genogram is a way to visually represent some of the intergenerational patterns that permeate the families that we're working with. not only patterns of challenge. So we have, for example, substance use is as indicated by the half-filled-in black box here, or criminal justice involvement as indicated by the blue on the top. But we can also show patterns of strength. So some of the ones that we've shown on this example, everyone who has green on the outside of their shape is somebody who's employed. Or everyone who has purple on the outside of their box or shape like we have here is someone who's a high school graduate. And this particular example also is indicating who lives on the reservation. So this was an example of a family living on a reservation, and so it was important to know kind of who was nearby, but also who has a driver's license. You know, in New York City, where I work and live, having a driver's license is more of a liability than an asset. But I know that's a little anomalous, and so it can be as important to sort of map out some of those very tangible resources. Think for a second about your own jurisdiction. What other kinds of patterns would be helpful if you were to be creating a map like this with some of the people that you're working with? Who can think of an example? Yeah. Other incarcerated family members, exactly. So here we see that both Dakota and his mother had spent some time involved in the criminal justice system. So that might open up a conversation there. Yes?
Mental illness.
Mental illness, another important one. And oddly, not represented on this map, but we do have it in the key. Up here, it's sort of an up and down line. So talking about histories of mental illness, or, you know, if you're talking about a reentry plan for somebody and who's going to be helping with medication compliance, certainly that's an important factor to keep in mind. So this is just one example of a type of family tool that you can use to both build rapport with clients, help staff start to see individuals in the context of their family, and then start to identify who might those support people be in the family. So another example is an eco-map, and I'll be curious to talk to Kelli after the session about how her eco-maps look. But the way that we typically think about eco-maps is what are the systems that a family is involved with. So if you can almost picture that genogram in the center, or a household in the center, and the question we would pose to the client would be, you know, what are the different systems your family's involved with? Think about a given week in your life or a month. What are those appointments that you keep? Who do you interact with? And if we think about a client on supervision, as we have here, there's somebody in the family who's on probation or parole supervision, that we can start to talk about how somebody's supervision might impact, for example, their access to public housing. If it's a jurisdiction that Ron Ashford hasn't yet convinced to utilize their discretion. Or, you know, what's going on with the drug treatment agency. So in this eco-map, what we see are not only those systems, those government systems, but also systems of choice, systems of support, a house of worship, a godparent, for example. And the different lines indicate the nature of the relationships. So is it a positive, sort of motivating relationship? Is there some conflict there? And, you know, many families, as you all know, are involved in many government systems and may be asked to do a lot of things to meet the various mandates. So how could we use a map like this to talk about where there might be overlap? Would one parenting program suffice for, you know, two different mandates, for example? But also, where might there be conflict, and how could we use a map like this to ameliorate that? So another kind of tool that I wanted to mention, so that, you know, the genogram is great for identifying who the family members might be in that sort of more biological family definition. An eco-map can be great for looking at who those other sources of support might be, thinking about that broad definition of family, and particularly using it in a community context. And what we found was that for correctional case managers, they didn't always have time to do these kinds of mapping tools. So we designed something that we called a relational inquiry tool. And the goal here was to have a sort of short list of questions that a correctional case manager could use not to necessarily assess whether this is a quote-unquote good or bad family, but instead to understand from the client's perspective who's in their support system, who's been there for them, who was there for them prior to incarceration, who's been there for them since they've been incarcerated, and who do they plan to rely on post-release. I'm sure you're all familiar with the mantra of, the people, places, and things we want to avoid. But how do we also talk about those people, those places, and things that can really support successful reentry? And we think a tool like this is one way to get both staff and clients thinking about who those relationships are. So far, we've gotten this. We've partnered with a couple of prison systems to implement this, men's and women's facilities. And we've tried using it in jail settings where people on the sentence side are not there as long. And then there's a slightly different version that's been up and running in Ohio's Department of Youth Services. So I'd like to share with you a couple of strategies that we're seeing in other jurisdictions beyond those that you've heard from the panel. But before I do that, one of the great things about conferences is there's such a wealth of knowledge in the room. So I'd like you guys to just take 2 minutes, and I will time you, to just turn to the person behind you, introduce yourself, and maybe share one thing that you're doing in your jurisdiction around families. Okay? Your 2 minutes begins now. Just turn around. To share one example of something going on in their jurisdiction or something that they learned from their short conversation. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Lois. I learned from this young lady here about a program in Harlem and that they've had the Vera training. And I learned that what we're trying to do with my agency is we want to do family reunification, but all of the guys that we encounter in the jails, because we do local jails, they've declined it. So I need to figure out how to get them motivated and want to get the family reunification training. So I'm going to get this young lady's information before I leave the conference.
Thank you, Lois. And I swear that was not planned that way. But yes, the Harlem Community Justice Center has a terrific program for those of you who want to learn more. So I think one thing that we hear a lot from agencies is, we're doing some really good family work in this one area of our system, of our work. How do we take that more broadly? And for us, I think there's a couple of questions that can be helpful, either with, to take back to your partners or just to kind of consider it for yourselves. But one is to really think about, your intake, assessment, and case management tools. Are they capturing information on the strengths of family and other natural connections? Is there room to define family broadly in your data system, for example, in your visitation policies and things like that? And how can we collect information on the resources that families are aware of? So if we go back to that EcoMap example, if we know somebody's going to need health services, post-release, rather than have our reentry coordinator run around and figure out what's the best neighborhood health provider, what if we could ask the family members, where do you go? Who treats you with respect? Where can you get an appointment? And have the family member share that information with their loved one. I think we've heard a number of examples of how it can be so powerful to bring in the family perspective. And, so one question may be to look at your materials and consider whether you could get some family member input on the messages that the materials are relaying. If you're sending out the orientation postcards like Leave's agency does, are they in sort of plain language? Are they in multiple languages, depending on your constituency? And how can your staff development address the role of family? So it's not just you fabulous people doing the great family work, but how can it kind of permeate your agency? So a couple of examples I just wanted to share with you. At the assessment stage, I think one of the exciting things that's going on in San Francisco with the probation department, and New York City is starting to look at this too, is how can we use family impact statements, sort of in the way we use victim impact statements, as part of the pre-sentence investigations to make sure that family considerations are being taken into account. We heard from a grantee earlier from Washington State DOC how they're actually using, they have a sentencing alternative for parents, sort of taking that family impact into account at incarceration. Another great thing, I think, are the family and friends handbooks that I'm seeing more and more states are putting on their websites and making available. In New Mexico, they were talking about how can we make sure those handbooks are available at all stages of the justice system involvement. So, for families who are leaving the courtroom and their loved one just, went into the jail, for example, how can they learn at that point what's it going to be like if my loved one becomes imprisoned? And also at the discharge and reentry planning stage, how can we bring family members, again, thinking of that broad definition of family, but how can we bring family members in to talk about what that discharge plan looks like or what resources the family is bringing, and maybe that could inform some of the parole board decisions that happen down the road. I think one thing that we're seeing a lot more of is use of technology, and certainly we're not implying that video visitation should replace in-person, but how could things like video visitation supplement some of the in-person visits and maybe make it possible for people whose loved ones are placed in out-of-state prisons or who could just visit potentially more frequently through things like video kiosks. More and more departments of corrections seem to be able to use email. We know our federal prison system has figured it out, and more state prisons are doing that. And, I think there's also a potential connection there with the sort of job readiness piece. In Ohio, on the juvenile side, they're sending their juvenile parole officers out with laptops. So when they're going and doing home visits while the youth are incarcerated, they can actually facilitate visits with the family. So what a difference when you're seeing mom and dad sitting in your living room and you're at a facility. And I think that those kinds of technologies can also help shift some of the rapport building and the relationships that staff have with families. So the parole officers in Ohio will talk about how, when they show up at the door, they're greeted with hugs and smiles now because they know that that their visit means they can also see their child in the facility. We've talked a little bit about staff development, and one resource I wanted to mention is there's a handbook that we developed with the American Probation and Parole Association. It's called the Family Support Approach for Community Supervision. And it gives you examples of those different mapping tools and how community corrections officers can use them in their context. And that's something that's free to download from APPA website. It's also linked on our website. The Family Support Approach to Community Supervision. And our website's here at the bottom. But there are two other documents that I wanted to mention that are available there. One is this Why Ask About Family, a guide for corrections, which may be useful in discussions with folks who come at this more from a law enforcement perspective. How can you make the case around the involvement of family increasing security within facilities? And it includes a checklist that may be helpful in staff meetings or other settings. And then we have this other document that's a little more recent called Setting an Agenda for Family-Focused Justice Reform. And I think it's intended to really get at the different cross-agency partnerships that are important in thinking about the issues that affect families and children of people who are incarcerated. So those are some other resources that are available. So we have about 25 minutes together left, and I'd like to open it up for questions. And I initially was thinking about running the mic back and forth, but then that seemed ridiculous. So I think instead what might make more sense is I will just repeat your question into the mic and then hand the microphone to the presenter who's going to respond. So you can open up for questions. Yes?
The replacement factor that Erik spoke about, how do you address that with women in terms of letting that man back into their life?
So with the replacement factor, how do you address that for women in terms of letting the man back into their lives?
One of the things that we developed, in fact, we've actually been working almost as much with the moms as the dads, even though we're the National Fatherhood Initiative, because in the vast majority of the situations, the father is the non-custodial, non-residential parent. And you've heard the term kind of gatekeeper probably thrown out there. Well, one of the things that we wanted to do at NFI is kind of turn that around and say, well, if mom is a gatekeeper, why can't she be the gateway? So we came up with it's a 3-session module that's called Mom is Gateway. And it's specifically designed for moms, and it uses the concept of maternal gatekeeping as the bridge. And we actually brought on as a consultant Dr. Marcia Pruitt, who is very knowledgeable around maternal gatekeeping, and we worked together to try to come up with something that would address that in a non-threatening way, and in a way that, because maternal gatekeeping in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. There's things that, as parents, we may need to gatekeep for the protection of our child, even more so, younger in their younger ages. But what we did was use that maternal gatekeeping, and we helped them assess their level of gatekeeping. And if it's excessive gatekeeping, then they become more aware of that. And through that process, we're also able to communicate the irreplaceable role that the father has in her child's life. And we work with those programs to make sure there's safety nets with that as well. Of course, any violence, or we don't want any of those kinds of situations in there. But in a majority of those situations, the dad is going through a program or a fatherhood program, and now the mom is starting to understand, well, he's really trying, and now has a better understanding of that. So what's interesting is that the programs that we've heard back from that are using Mom as Gateway have found that the moms become the biggest recruiter of the dads to the fatherhood program. So that's the main way right now. We're doing a lot of different things in terms of specific kinds of resources for moms to help them understand the important role that the dad plays in their child's life. But that's been the biggest programmatic component that we've done that we've had success with. If you go to our website, fatherhood.org, you can find it, or you can go to fathersource.org as well. It's a downloadable module, and once you download it, you can make as many copies of the handouts and all that as you need. So, it's www.fatherhood.org is the main website for our organization. And if you want to go straight to our online resource center, that would be fathersource.org, just one word.
Are these all, this entire presentation was driving, is it up to everyone, or do you have individual handouts that we can take with us today?
We do not have individual handouts, and I believe the presentations are on the stick.
Or they'll be posted on the website.
Which website?
CSG.org, or excuse me, National Reentry Resource Center.org. So you had a question here and there, yeah.
I'd like to hear more about the family transition circles. Could you tell, as you try to recruit people for those, help people volunteer, and what kind of structure you might use for their...
So people volunteer. They a lot of how we work it at this point is through word of mouth. So if somebody sees a family transition circle happening, they become interested and through the jail system send an action request. Then they're met with by the program facilitator of that piece of the program. Then they have to fill out some questions about what they're willing to take accountability for and responsibility for, sort of what their interests are, to see if they're really ready to go through that process. There's a series of meetings that happen before the family begins to get involved. So that same philosophy of really working with the client first to make sure that it's appropriate to involve the family members. And then at that point, it's assessed, if children are going to be involved, at what age, what are the struggles that we're dealing with, what's appropriate. And then the family is met with by the program facilitator as well. There's a lot of pre-work that happens before the circle occurs. And then once they get into the circle, they're allowed to bring in different foods, different family items, different things from their culture, whether it be music or a piece of a photograph, a piece from their home, so it can be family-oriented. And then in the circle, they have a talking piece, and they each go around being asked a series of questions by the facilitator and answering those based on all of that pre-work that they've done.
What would motivate an inmate, client to ask for this?
Well, I think they're ready to heal. I mean, I think they're ready at that point to face what has gone on for them and vice versa. And it's not just a perspective that only they need to have. Their whole family has to be involved at looking at where things happen to get to where they are, where someone's incarcerated, whether it be that example I used earlier of a death occurring, or, they're all very difficult times of things, but I think they're ready. And I think that through the parenting class and through the support and through this idea that they deserve better, that this is not the life that they deserve, that they're ready to make that happen for themselves. And it is a lot of work, and you do have to be ready. But at this point, they also see other people do it, and they see it work for them. And so at this point, we're getting way more requests than we can answer. And the deputized staff will come by and hand Kleenexes inside the room because it's such an emotional process as well. So
I was just wondering, the father's initiative, all of this, is it all on the website? Can we get all of the information off the website?
You can, yes. You can go right to fatherhood.org, and there are helpful categories like for organizations, for fathers, for the media. So for most of you would find everything, just click on for organizations, and you'll see drop-down menus for corrections or incarcerated fathers, and there'll be pages for you that help navigate.
The programs are all, the program is free, and then we download it and duplicate it. All of them?
Well, no, most of the programs there would be a cost for, like the downloadable one that I mentioned is like $24.95 or something to download it, but then you can make as many copies as you want of all the handouts and all of that. You have everything you need. So in that case, there would be costs for most of the curriculum. Now, one of the things that we do like to do, if you're interested in that, and I know resource strapped at times, we will partner with you if you'd like, or at least have a conversation to do maybe a joint proposal to raise some funds to implement that and to cover the cost for what you might need. So we're really a lot about creating strategic alliances with agencies and organizations such as yourself who are at the nexus of fathers and families, because we don't provide the direct services. So we're not in any competition, so we can work from that perspective as well. But I'll have cards up here, some business cards. If anybody wants to contact me directly, you can do that, and I can help you navigate that as well.
Do you have a question, sir?
Yes. One of the things that we currently face today is one of the realities that fathers, they enter the system as a father, but the reality is today that they come out as a grandfather. And so now they have to deal with not only adult children, they have to connect to grandchildren, which is almost practically nearly none because they had no connection with the grandchildren. So these programs sometimes don't deal with that. And so we have a problem with that because there's so much of a big divide between the adult child now, because that was daddy's little girl or whatever when they went in, but it's adult, and she has to deal with whoever, grandchildren. So what mechanism can we use to actually get a connection here? Because these guys coming out now, that's a reality today. These guys who was getting incarcerated in the 70s and 80s, they coming out now. And that's a big problem for where I'm at. So what can we do to kind of make a bigger connection or impact on something of that nature?
I'm wondering if Leave wants to comment on this. So the question was about, people going in as parents, coming out as grandparents, and how to reinforce the connections to both generations.
I guess, can I ask some do you mind if I ask some clarifying? information. So when you say assist them to be grandparents, do you mean the reality that they're no longer going to have a little person, or the reality that their person is an adult and they need to work with them as an adult?
Right, as an adult, and also they have to deal with grandchildren now too. See, it's a double-edged thing now. Because when they come out now, they got to try to relate to not only an adult child, but, you know, it's grandchildren running around there now. See what I'm saying?
So I guess a couple of things for me is that it all depends on the person themselves. If the individual had visitation while they were incarcerated, they are familiar with that. They've seen their adult child and they've seen their grandchildren if they got approved for visitation. So they have actually seen their family change in front of them, and so they are somewhat prepared. For those that have not had visitation, that becomes a little more difficult, and you have to ask them if they're planning to have connection with those family members, and if they are having connection with those family members, you need to work with the family as a unit for preparation, separately as well as a group. That's what we do. We actually do it talking to the family and then also talking to that individual, and if they need assistance, meeting for the first time, do they need assistance making sure that there's somebody else there to help mediate that or bridge that, or making sure that they have social supports for the long term. I think it really does depend on the person themselves, whether or not they had visitation, whether or not they've had communication, whether or not they have contact. I will let you know that I've seen on more often than not, I've seen cases of family members. It is the adult child who is providing the housing and the support service for this parent coming back. Seriously, I mean, they're standing there, and I have to say, when I talk to these adult children and I say, so you're going to be providing housing and support, and they are amazing people. They are not angry. They are not upset. They want to be a support person for their parent because they want them to be an active grandparent. They want them to be engaged in their family. So, and if they're there at the table and they're there, they want that engagement. I think the difficult part is for the parent or the grandparent who is trying to find a way to re-enter the other family members' lives because there's not been an active role. That is difficult, and that is something that's going to take time and energy for us to figure out together, actually, how we're going to do that, because both sides have to want it. The adult child and those grandchildren have to want that relationship with that person who's releasing, so it's on both sides. I don't know if that answers your question or if that's helpful.
It's helpful.
Yes.
I have a question about fathers who have substance abuse issues, or history, I should say. They've turned multiple bridges in the family. On one of the slides I saw where making amends was a part of the process. Without knowing the entire process, what outcome measures do you guys use to determine when making amends is applicable for each individual person? I understand with the substance abuse and with the fatherhood, if they're going to do fellowships and if they're in the 12 steps, it's a part of that 12-step program, and if they're not ready, if it's like step 9, then they don't start that process. So how do you kind of overlap or get to a place where bringing the family in is conducive to helping the whole process continue instead of circumventing other processes?
So the question was about when people are ready to take the make amends step, and then what's the connection to 12-step and other sorts of programs?
How do you avoid not circumventing the other steps?
That's a tough one. That's a tough question.
Yeah, earlier I said about solving the world's problems, but no. I can only speak from a curricula design perspective, and maybe you can speak a little bit more on the front line kind of perspective. But when we design our curriculum, we design it from the perspective it's first the man and then the father. And what really the goal of both Inside Out Dad and 24/7 Dad is to help these men become more nurturing in all of their relationships. And that requires a holistic perspective, including those issues that you just put out there. Because what we're doing is we're trying to get down to the, peeling away the layers of the onion, getting down to the root issues from the weeds. All those analogies would apply here. But it's first man and then the father, because if we're helping them become more nurturing men, being a father or a relationship with whatever their other roles are in their life, it all comes out of if you're a nurturing person. And so the way that we do that throughout the different sessions is we have experiential activities where the concepts are reinforced by these experiential activities that help them see through the eyes of other people. And we use the child as that powerful motivating component as well, because we'll help them deal with issues within themselves, and then we'll ask them to now think through the eyes of your child. And we do that through a variety of different ways. But it's really up to the facilitators in many cases, the ones that are really working with them on the front line and their case managers, to look at that, because what we provide, the curricula is only one piece of a larger case management process. And in the case of, the examples that were up here, a much broader, more in-depth work with not just them, but their family and extended, support networks and things like that. But from a curricular perspective, that's how we always look at it, is that, we're trying to address these deeper rooted issues in that individual as a man first, and then it'll affect the relationships and the decisions made and the motivation to want to make some of those other healthier choices in life to sustain those, ongoing. So does anybody?
And you had a question also about outcome measures?
Yeah, the outcome measures that you use to determine when somebody is ready to make a meeting.
That is so individual.
I mean, I think the important point that you're making is that just because you have a setup of any program component doesn't mean that it fits everybody. And it specifically also means that when people have burned a lot of bridges and there has been a lot of pain for the family, that I certainly don't go into it with the perspective that you must come in and you must get behind this person. And that's why we have the perspective that that person really needs to be the leader in their healing. And certainly with substance abuse and those kinds of things, it is also possible and compounded by the fact that people can have historical family pain that could lead to some of those things. So it might be appropriate that the person has a conversation with their mother, for instance, maybe not their child at that point, but with their mother about things that had happened or their family, and that may be part of their process in recovery. And in San Francisco, there's a million programs that are happening that address all of these things, and we try to work together to make sure that happens. But I think the important piece in what you're saying is that it just isn't a one-size-fits-all situation, and you don't always know the right answer, and you can't guarantee they won't burn another bridge. Part of recovery is relapse at times. And so, but what you can guarantee or what you can do is the setup, and is the way that the parent, in our case, sort of takes control of their process in a way that they may never have done before. And that we do our due diligence across programs and with the other people that we're working with to make sure we have a system of checks and balances. And you don't have any one person just kind of making those decisions or pushing an agenda that's not appropriate onto that client.
Kelli, can I just add to that?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Katie Kramer. I work with Kelli. I'm the evaluator for the program. And
I just want to add, there's not specific outcomes measures, but the whole issue of the amending the harm was part of the family transition circles, and I think it is important that folks realize that that is a service component that does not come in right away. That individuals are already part of a larger system, so they've already been a part of the parenting program for a while. A lot of these individuals are in substance abuse treatment inside, as well as individual and family therapy, before they even enter the idea of having a family transitional circle. So it doesn't get to the specific measurement, but we've definitely looked at kind of the continuum of services and where it makes sense to introduce different service components based on the individual's journey to get to certain places. So I think that is another important piece.
We have a question over here.
I stepped up because I had my own kid issues, but so if you answer this while it's done, let me know. Kelli, you mentioned that you use an evidence-based cognitive behavioral program. Is it, and you called it Inside Out? Is it the same program that?
It is not. So the question was about the curriculum that we use, and the curriculum that we use is called Parenting Inside Out, and it's from the Oregon Social Justice Learning Center, and it has several different components that make it much more than a parenting class. Our clients usually call it a people's class because it starts with communication and empathy building and problem solving. So instead of just the logistics of what your child might need, what do you need and how can you communicate effectively to get what you need for yourself and your child? And then also goes through things like genograms and historical perspectives, and then also what a parent job is, what a child's job is, and all of those logisticals, including brain development, which the clients really love as well. So really what the impact of their relationship with their children can have on things like the brain. So that's what we use. I don't know if you want to talk more about what you
Okay, I'm familiar with that one. I just didn't know if it was the same one that you were using. And the second question I had was for you on the point of entry. We want to work with the family, but we're having a hard time getting a point of entry. Is it from the PSI? Because, in our county, they're talking about, well, there's confidentiality and some of those families don't want to be involved. We seem to think, like you, that they do want to be involved, but no one's inviting them to be involved. How would you tell us to go about finding that point of entry?
First, who are you? What are you, probation and parole?
I actually coordinate the Second Chance Grant, so I work with all the community partners in our group, and I work with parole, I work with all the corrections people, I work with all the community providers. I'm from Michigan.
Okay. No, I'm just wondering because that changes where people start. So for us, we start at 6 months out from release, and that's what we advise folks if they're planning for transition or release or they want to engage to make sure everybody's on the same page for transition. For folks with special needs, I would say push it out farther. But for 6 months is a really good place to start because you can reach in, connect, see what's been going on while they've been incarcerated and make sure where is the family, how is it working for the family. But I'm going to be honest with you. One of the things that's happening for us is that we're seeing a real need to start at pretrial and that we want to start earlier. We want to engage them right through the gate. And so this summer, we're actually developing curriculum and are going to go into the jail.
That's exactly what we just came up with last week. We just said, let's look at pretrial, the PSI, give us...
So if you'd like, we would love to include you in that conversation because we're going to start our advisory group. We're going into pretrial. We're working with Portland State University with our MSW program so that we're doing it out of the gate. We're developing outcome measures so that we understand that what we're looking at for the long term, what impact does it have to start at that time. So we're including a lot of folks. We're also making sure that we're including trauma-informed care as part of our process, that we're making sure that that is right at the gate and we're looking at the trauma, not impacting just the offender, but also the family, the trauma for that family, where it's children, adult children, grandchildren, wherever it's impacting. So we're starting and we're going to do it at pretrial, and we're doing it with a lot of partners to ensure that we're out of the gate, we're connecting who we need to. So we'll keep you posted.
Thank you. I'll write it down.
Excellent. Thanks.
All right, so I think we're about at time, but I think we'll stay up here for a few minutes after the session if people have individual questions, and please join me in thanking our terrific panel.